Hello, I'm Manuel, and welcome to Stillnight History. Before we begin, I want you to do something for me. Dim the lights, find your most comfortable position, and maybe adjust your pillow, the one that actually has feathers or foam in it, and not rotted straw. Tonight we're going on a journey back to the year 1348. Forget the movies with the brave knights in shining armor and the clean stone castles. In reality, those knights smelled like a wet dog that had been rolling in old ham. And the castles were basically giant, drafty stone refrigerators. Before we dive into the mud of the 14th century, please subscribe and like if these stories help you rest. Now, let's go back. Tonight you aren't a king, you aren't even a squire, you are a peasant, and I'm here to tell you why your life is a 24/7 struggle that would make a modern survivalist cry. But don't worry, as you listen to the grim details of your new existence, let the sound of my voice help you drift off into a sleep that, unlike your medieval counterparts, is actually peaceful. Congratulations, you've just woken up at 4:30 a.m. because the sun is thinking about rising and the rooster is having a personal crisis outside your door. You aren't waking up on Egyptian cotton. Your bed is a linen sack stuffed with straw, which sounds rustic, until you realize that 3 generations of mice and a very ambitious colony of bedbugs have claimed the left side of the mattress as their sovereign territory. You don't have a bedroom, you have a room, singular. In this room you have your spouse, 4 children, a confused goat and a couple of chickens that think your head is a great place to perch. The air is a thick, fragrant soup of wood smoke, unwashed wool, and the distinct aroma of a cow that hasn't seen a bathtub in its entire life. You stretch and your back cracks like a dry twig because you spent yesterday hauling rocks for a lord who doesn't even know your name. Now let's talk about your morning routine. You don't go to the bathroom, you go to the bucket, and if the bucket is full, you go to the garden. There is no toilet paper. There is only a handful of moss, or a particularly smooth leaf if you're feeling fancy. You splash some water on your face from a wooden bowl, but the water has a suspicious grey tint, because it came from the same stream where your neighbour, Old Man Cedric, just washed his pigs. You don't brush your teeth with a vibrating electric brush. You might rub a soot-covered rag over your gums and hope for the best. By the time you're 25, you'll have the smile of a jack-o'-lantern, and your breath will be powerful enough to repel Viking invaders. But hey, at least everyone else smells exactly the same, so it's socially acceptable. Breakfast is served, and it's a gastronomic adventure called pottage. Pottage is essentially a thick, lukewarm sludge made of oats, beans and whatever vegetable fell off the cart yesterday. It has been simmering in a black iron pot for 3 days. You don't clean the pot, you just add more stuff to the top. It's an eternal stew. On the side you have a hunk of rye bread that is so hard you could use it as a lethal weapon. There's a good chance it contains a little bit of sawdust, or some ground up pebbles, because the miller was feeling greedy this month. You wash it all down with small beer. You drink beer for breakfast because the water in the well is essentially a liquid science experiment that will give you dysentery before noon. You aren't drunk, you're just slightly hydrated and very, very tired. Now it's time to head to the fields. Your job is simple. Do not die while working until the sun goes down. You spend 14 hours a day swinging a heavy wooden tool at dirt that is harder than your bread. There is no SPF 50. There is only a straw hat, and the realization that your skin is becoming the texture of a well-worn boot. If you get a blister and it gets infected, that's not a medical issue. That's a life ender. You don't have an HR department to complain to. If a horse kicks you, you just pray to a saint you've never heard of and hope your humours are in balance. The local doctor is also the barber, and his primary medical tool is a very sharp knife and a jar of hungry leeches. If you have a headache, he might suggest cutting your arm to let the bad blood out. It's a miracle anyone survives past 30, yet here you are, hacking away at a turnip field while a crow mocks you from a nearby fence. Since your day is mostly sweat and dirt, you might be wondering about a bath. In the Middle Ages, bathing isn't a relaxing ritual with lavender bath bombs. It's a logistical nightmare. To have a warm bath, you first have to carry dozens of buckets of water from the stream, which, as we discussed, is currently occupied by Cedric's pigs. Then you have to heat that water over a temperamental fire that fills your house with smoke. By the time the water is lukewarm, you're too exhausted to even get in. Often the whole family uses the same water. You, being the hard-working peasant, are likely the last one in. By the time it's your turn, the water is less like a bath and more like a thick grey soup of family history. Most of the time you just settle for a dry wash, rubbing your skin with a piece of linen and hoping for the best. You don't smell like a spring meadow, you smell like a campfire that's been put out with old milk. And strangely, you're fine with it because the person standing next to you smells exactly the same. And if you're feeling under the weather from all that grime, remember that your medical options are creative. Your local doctor believes your body is a delicate balance of liquids. Feeling a bit feverish? The solution isn't rest. It's inviting a dozen hungry leeches to a dinner party on your forearm. You watch in a state of exhausted boredom as these little slimy creatures do their work, while the doctor explains that your bad air is simply leaving your body. If you have a persistent ache, you might be told to rub crushed snails on your forehead or apply a poultice made of pigeon droppings. There is a belief that if a medicine smells absolutely revolting, it must be working twice as hard. You sit there covered in a compost-scented paste, listening to a prayer in a language you don't understand, realizing that the best medical strategy is simply to avoid getting sick in the first place. As the sun finally sets and the long, difficult day comes to an end, you head back to your hut. Dinner is more pottage, perhaps with a piece of salt pork that is mostly fat and ancient memories. You spend the evening in the flickering light of the hearth, listening to the wind howl through the gaps in your walls. But you aren't there. You are here, in your soft bed, with your clean sheets and your lack of livestock in the living room. You are safe, you are warm, and the only thing you have to do is let go of the day. The leeches, the hard bread, and the cold streams of 1348 are all just echoes now. Your body is at peace, supported by modern comfort. The darkness of the past is fading away, replaced by the quiet safety of your own home. Sleep is the only remedy you need tonight. Now we are going with the second story, a story that will continue to help you deepen your sleep. Imagine we are leaving the peasant fields behind, to enter a world that is, in many ways, even more exhausting and significantly more ridiculous. We are traveling to the year 1363. Imagine for a moment that you have managed to save a few coins. Perhaps you sold a surplus of grain, or you've been particularly frugal with your small beer. You decide that you want to treat yourself to something fine. You want to look like the people you see in the manuscripts, the knights and the wealthy merchants who walk with an air of importance. You decide you want a new tunic, perhaps in a deep shade of blue, and a pair of the most fashionable shoes in Europe, the poulain. These shoes are the height of 14th century vanity, featuring toes so long and pointed that they look like the beak of a very thin bird. But before you can even reach the tailor's shop, you must understand that in the Middle Ages, your clothes were not a matter of personal choice, they were a matter of law. Tonight we are exploring the incredibly tedious and meticulously boring world of the medieval fashion police, also known as the sumptuary laws. These were not suggestions, they were rigid bureaucratic statutes designed to ensure that everyone's social status was visible from 100 yards away. In 1363, King Edward III of England looked out at his kingdom and decided that commoners were starting to look a bit too much like lords, and he simply couldn't have that. He passed the Statute of Diet and Apparel, a document so dry and filled with technical jargon about fabric weights and fur types that it has been known to put even the most dedicated historians into a deep trance. Imagine standing in a drafty wooden hall while a local bailiff, a man with a very long nose and an even longer scroll of parchment, begins to read the new regulations. His voice is a flat, rhythmic drone that matches the dripping of the rain outside. He explains that if you are a servant or a common labourer, you are strictly forbidden from wearing any cloth that costs more than 2 marks for the whole piece. You aren't allowed to wear gold or silver thread. You aren't even allowed to wear silk. If you so much as touch a piece of velvet, you are technically flirting with a criminal record. The law specifies that your clothing must be made of the coarsest wool, preferably in shades of brown, grey, or that particularly uninspiring colour known as natural sheep. The bailiff continues, his voice sinking into the details of accessories. He explains that your belt cannot be made of silk, nor can it have any silver ornaments. If you are a yeoman, someone slightly above a basic labourer, you might be allowed a little bit of silver on your knife handle, but only if you have land worth £40. If your land is worth £39, you must remain in the world of plain wood and iron. The sheer amount of math required to get dressed in the morning is staggering. Every button, every lace, and every hem is a calculation of your net worth and your family's history. It is a world where the fashion police are real, and they carry rulers to measure the width of your sleeves. Now let's talk about those shoes you wanted, the poulains. These shoes were the ultimate symbol of boring drama. The nobility loved them because the long toes proved they didn't have to do any actual work. You can't exactly plough a field or chase a cow when your shoes extend 12 inches past your toes. The wealthiest aristocrats had points so long they have to tie them to their knees with small silver or gold chains, just to keep from tripping. But as a commoner, the law is very specific. The bailiff reaches the section on footwear and reads that no person under the rank of a knight may wear shoes with points exceeding 2 inches. Imagine the scene. You are walking through the market, feeling quite proud of your new 4-inch pointed shoes when you see a group of officials. They aren't looking for thieves or murderers today, they are looking for illegal footwear. One of them stops you and makes you stand perfectly still on the cobblestones. He kneels down with the standardized wooden measuring stick. He sighs, a sound of pure, exhausted bureaucracy. Your shoes are 2 inches over the legal limit of vanity. He doesn't arrest you, but he does take out a small, sharp knife and ceremoniously chops the points off your shoes right there in the street. You are left standing in what look like 2 deflated leather bags, while the official records your name in a massive, heavy ledger that contains the names of every other person in the county who tried to look slightly more fashionable than they were allowed to be. The boredom of these laws extended to the very fibres of the fabric. There were specific rules about fur. If you weren't a lady of high birth, you couldn't wear ermine or sable. You were stuck with the fur of rabbits, cats, or perhaps a particularly fluffy squirrel if you were lucky. The officials spent their days inspecting the linings of cloaks, looking for hidden silk or unauthorized fox fur. It was a world of endless inspections and petty fines. Imagine the meetings of the Royal Council, where grown men spent 6 hours debating whether a merchant's daughter should be allowed to wear a linen veil with a silk border, or if that would lead to the total collapse of the social order. They wrote thousands of pages of these regulations, documenting every possible combination of thread and status. Even the colours were policed. Purple, as we know, was the colour of kings, created from the expensive secretions of sea snails. But even less exotic colours like vibrant reds and deep blues were often restricted because the dyes were too costly for the lower orders. You lived in a world of beige, tan and muddy green, while the elite floated by in a parade of prohibited silks and illegal embroidery. The frustration of these laws was constant, but the enforcement was so slow and so tied up in paperwork that it felt like a heavy, invisible fog hanging over every tailor's shop in the land. But as you listen to the details of these ancient, dusty laws, you realize how far away they are. The bailiff has long since put away his ruler. King Edward's statute is now nothing more than a crumbly piece of parchment in a dark archive, unread for centuries. You are in your bed and there is no one here to measure your sleeves or check the lining of your blanket. You could be wearing a tunic of solid gold, or a pair of shoes 10 feet long, and the only person who would care is you. The weight of those 300 years of fashion regulations is lifting off your shoulders. The image of the official counting the buttons on a coat is fading, replaced by the soft, dark silence of your room. The history of the Middle Ages is often told through battles and crowns, but the true history is found in these quiet, boring moments, the endless counting of stitches, the measuring of leather, and the slow, rhythmic reading of laws in a language that no longer exists. Let the sound of that rhythmic reading pull you deeper into your pillows. You are safe from the fashion police. You are safe from the Sumptuary Statutes. There is no one to fine you, no one to measure you, and no one to tell you that your blanket is made of the wrong kind of wool. Everything is permitted in the world of sleep. Every tension in your body is a law that has just been repealed. Your breathing is slow and steady, like a clerk turning a very large, very heavy page in a book of records. The night is long. The history is finished for today, and the only thing left to do is let the darkness wrap around you like a cloak of the finest, most legal silk imaginable. Close your eyes. The bailiff has gone home, the king is asleep, and now so are you. Sleep, sleep.